So that's now going, Paige. Just keep it landscape like that.
Yeah.
Bit of shine on the coat, is that important?
Oh,
yeah,
it is a massive indicator of health.
Yeah. Who's going to kick it off?
I can if you want. Okay. Alrighty, you give us the signal.
Okay.
Awesome. Alright, hello everyone. My name's John O'Frew. We're out here at Lake Hawea Station, just above Lake Hawea, and we're standing in a very tall, diverse species, what we call a setup crop, supplied by Symbiosis Ag Limited, and we're here with Finn Ross and Geoff Ross, and also Jake Heron, who's just stepped in as a coach for Natural Performance Limited. Very excited about introducing Jake, and we're going to have a conversation here about the future possibilities around winter grazing. And I'm going to give an opportunity here for Finn and Geoff to talk a bit about their experiences and what they've learned in their first season of playing with these new ways of farming, and also to talk about in particular this paddock and the animals in it. So why don't we start off with Geoff, why don't you give us a bit of information about the paddock we're standing in?
Well, this paddock, obviously we want to winter our Angus. We want to have those Angus cattle really having strong growth rates through the winter. This paddock was actually a fodder beet paddock last winter for that very reason. We needed to keep those cattle pumping through the winter. At the end of the winter, we looked at the soil. It was relatively compacted, not a lot. There was very little life in it. We thought, right, what are we going to do? Are we going to rip it up, start again, or do we put in a crop which Jono's suggested? So we went that way. It's under the pivot here, so we obviously got great growth during the summer. I guess the biggest fear going into something unknown is what you're going to produce. So my fear was we wouldn't get enough tonnage, we wouldn't get enough dry matter or ME. What's actually transpired is, you can probably see a little here, is we're doing DM tests on this, but we reckon it'd be north of 20 tonne.
Yeah.
ME looks to be very high, but I mean the ultimate indicator is looking at the cattle. They're just performing very, very well. You know, they're happy. The growth rates are strong. They're not shitty. And the other obvious indicator is the health, not only of cattle but your soil. So if we were to put a spade in here, the soil's fantastic. It's full of worms and worms, and there's plenty of birds and bees around. So look, year one of this winter crop seems to be going bloody well.
And when I came into this paddock with the guys here at LHS, when it was just grazed fodder beet this time, or a bit earlier last season after winter, the soil, like Geoff said, was very compacted. We didn't have any worms, and the traditional way of approaching that would be to come in and cultivate the soil, prepare the seed bed, put down some seed, supply the nutrients that we need to grow that seed, and that's normally how we start. And then I came in with this crazy idea of just direct drilling, 25, 26 different species and using no fertilizer. I mean, what was that like for you guys to hear that sort of crazy suggestion?
Well, it was a bit unnerving, yeah, for sure. You're taking a leap of faith, but look, again, looking at the soil thus far, it's going bloody well.
Yeah, and if Paige, if you're able to just pan around and check out these cattle, normally at this time of year, if you're standing on the other side of an electric fence near any cattle, you often hear a great song of of cows telling you that they would like some more food. We're just blown away with how content these animals are, and how clean they are. If you can see that, I don't know if you can see that, but just how clean these guys are. Another really cool thing about that is also, if we step through here, one of the big concerns that farmers have, and that is talked about in farming circles, is the detrimental aspect of winter grazing as far as runoff of nutrients and soil loss and soil compaction and degradation. But if you're to look down here, I don't know if you can come down here, Paige, and just show the viewers what we're able to leave behind as far as a a protective layer of plant material on the soil surface such that we don't have mud. You know, if you can see these cows, the feet are clean, like it's crazy. And there has been a significant, what sort of rainfall has there been up here recently?
We've had a heap in the last week.
Yeah.
I'm not sure, in mils, maybe 40 mils in the last couple of weeks.
Yep. And when this was in fodder bed, it was just bare soil, in hoofs, big holes of pugging, which is, a big sensitive subject. And then of course we're left with nothing behind the animals. But what we're able to do here is, after grazing, we can simply keep a back fence up behind these animals, and this stuff, we get regrowth, and we get, as you can see when we pan back around here, Paige, a lot of the stuff has produced seed. So I've got quinoa, we've got sunflowers, we've got vetch, phacelia, lupins, buckwheat, all dropping seed on the ground. That's then going to come away, and we get regrowth now and through into the spring when things really start to ramp up. And it doesn't cost us anything. We don't have to spend any money. So
how exciting is it, Jono? We've seen buckwheat germinating in here this morning in June, which is a warm season plant. Very uncommon to see it germinating at this time of year.
Yeah, and I don't know if you can see, we're trained with our eyes in farming to look for green. We want this high ME. We've got this picture of what our crops need to look like if we're going to put weight on animals. And a lot of people would look at this, if you pan around here, Paige, if we pick out on some species like the quinoa, standing up tall like this, and like the sunflowers, which have all produced seed and are now senescing and returning back to the soil, if we were just to look at those, people would think, man, that's, poor quality, it's gone past its, use by date. But what that's doing, and Finn asked the question before, is a great question, what feed value is in stuff like that sunflower. Well, when we can balance carbon to nitrogen ratios, or traditionally known as fibre and protein levels, keeping that fibre up, keeping that carbon up, the animals actually eat quite a lot less, because the conversion of biomass into energy is greatly improved because of that balancing. And as a result, if we look down here, let's find some poo. The poo is, if you check this out down here, Paige, is it's got some substance to it. It's got some structure. It's not just loose, runny, yucky, high nitrate poo. It's you can see there, all of that material has been used and converted into energy, and the energy and the nutrients have stayed within the animal, and so we don't get all this nutrient runoff with all this runny poo.
I think it's such an important conversation nationally. There's been a lot of controversy around winter grazing at the moment, and a lot of farmers don't, as you said before, Jake, they don't like to see all their stock, up to their knees in mud, and it doesn't look nice. But they sort of said there's no other way, right? We've got to get our stock through winter, and I think this is a pretty promising alternative. I mean, we've walked past some conventional winter grazing systems, and I mean, I've got one question there, Jono, which is around, obviously we've got high biomass here, but intuitively with bare ground, and there's still a bit of bare ground cover here. I mean, it's in its first year, but with a high bare ground cover, the two key environmental performance indicators from my perspective are the carbon, higher soil carbon, and runoff as well. Obviously there's going to be less runoff here. There's no water pooling on the surface, but there's still a little bit of bare ground cover. So how do those sort of performance indicators compare against traditional winter grazing methods?
Yeah, and it's a great question, because it's not something we often bring up as a performance indicator. It's just simply seen as a unavoidable byproduct of grazing cattle over winter. I mean, it doesn't need to be that way. And even if you get down really close, what looks like bare soil, Finn, if we actually get right down here and get curious, is actually there's very little bare soil. And if we get interested in looking for actual hoof prints, it's actually very hard. Here's a remnants of one. It's actually very hard to see any actual hoof prints on the soil. But to put an economic value on bare soil and carbon loss, and especially the loss of soil structure and what that does for our microbial communities in the soil, and the success of the following crops, or the regrowth of likes of this crops, is it's got a massive financial value. If you can imagine, and also water infiltration, like it's incredible. All my years of farming, I was never taught to measure water infiltration. You know, we all get caught up in what's our rainfall, and we all have to, as part of our responsibility as farmers, monitor our water applications, but no one's talking about infiltration of water. And when we can keep these roots deep in the soil, keep the soil covered with this armor, we don't lose our water infiltration, likes of what we saw in this paddock after last year's crop, where we had anaerobic soils. It was really stinky. It had a really ammonium smell to it. There was no life. But here we get to keep the soil porosity at a level where microbial activity stays high. But then also when we do get rain, you can imagine like stones in a body of water, a moving body of water, is if there is any movement on the soil surface, say likes of what we had down home a few weeks ago, we get 300 mil of rain in 48 hours, we get to saturation. Well, the material sitting on the soil surface actually allows for the water to slow down. We don't lose a lot of nutrients through the loss of soil, and the water gets a chance to actually get into the soil where it can be of use to us.
So if we compared this across the board to our traditional turnips and grass mix, I mean, biodiversity, it's pumping full of biodiversity right here compared to the traditional winter grazing mix. I mean, look at all the birds, bugs, bees, everything, butterflies, biodiversity performing better, carbon. I mean, look at all there's a lot of biomass still left, and a lot left in the soil. Plus carbon, we're not tilling it, right? We're not touching the surface. We're not turning it over, which is where you lose all your carbon.
Yeah.
Water, it's better, better ground infiltration. There's no water pooling on the surface here at all, which means we've got to irrigate less. We've got more water availability. So that's sort of the environmental side. Then animal health side. It's hard to say intrinsically, but these animals look healthier than any other animals I've seen on winter grazing.
Yeah, when we put the scales on them, we'll get weight gains as good, if not better, than last year.
Yeah.
So weight gain is one side of the cost, the economics of it. The other side is inputs. The inputs have actually been way lower than traditional winter grazing.
Well,
and of animal health as well.
Yeah.
True. Actually, yeah, we last year we had some animal health issues. We had to take them off fodder beet, then reintroduce them off and on. Had to do that a couple of times. With these stock are just happy they're here.
So there's a labour saving in that as well.
Whole time. And the other cool thing come the spring is with that fodder beet crop, we had to start again. We had to, okay, what are we going to put in now? But this crop, Jono, all going well, come spring, it's going to regenerate itself, right?
Yeah, well, it's already starting.
You're not going to have to put the tractor back in here to replant. It's got from that seed bed, and what the plants naturally seeded themselves, we should be away in spring, which I guess is where the whole term regenerative comes from.
Yeah.
And then you've got options that can be banked for winter feed again. It can be summer feed, or it can be spring feed for you, the land. You've got options.
Yeah.
At the other end of that.
So this is our third year. This is our second winter regen crop, right? We put in 3 hectares in the first year, then 80 hectares.
Yeah.
So how many hectares more we're going to put in on spring? And on the pivot here, we've got 57 hectares under the pivot. We've got how many hectares on this?
This is only 4.5 hectares. There's the first kind of winter regen under the pivot. Most of our winter regen's down on the lake. So we'll you can't convert your whole farm in one season. So we'll, as some of the older, burnt out traditional pastures come to their expiry date, we'll cycle those into more regenerative pastures. Typically starting with, a crop like this, but then going into a permanent cycling. That's the theory, isn't it? We'll cycle out of this. You can't win a crop every year on the same ground. Cycle out of this into a permanent.
That's right, and that's a new. We're not used to that as a process. Just simply taking the opportunity of using a diverse setup crop to increase soil function, but as a byproduct, feed animals with bulk feed over winter. But then the key thing is it's the start of the process of getting back into a permanent pasture that's able to be supported by the active, diverse microbial communities that you've established through growing a crop like this, such that when we get to the perennial phase, we just simply drill that in. There's no termination, no spraying out, no need to cultivate. We just simply, after grazing probably in the summer next season, or maybe even right through into the autumn, so we get 3-4 grazings out of this one planting, we then assess, okay, how much seed drops, which as we had a wee look on our hands and knees there before, there's a lot of seed in here, all produced just through the growth of this crop. How long is that going to last us? And there's no set recipe. We've got to use our observation to able to understand when's the right time to come in with the perennial, because if we go too early, annual seeds sitting on the soil surface are always going to be the first to get up and away. They've got a lot more vigor, a lot more boogie than the perennial seeds that were drilled below the soil surface. So we want to allow them to express themselves, get the most benefit out of that initial expenditure of planting, which that cost here was, I think it was $280 for this crop, and then to the cost of drilling. And another thing we haven't talked about, Finn mentioned it with the soil carbon thing, is sure there's a level of soil building through this, what we call the detritus, or the decomposition of the biomass on the soil surface, and as we pointed out, the lovely fecal sample there before, that's all organic matter returning to the soil. But the most important part of the building up of soil carbon is actually the liquid carbon pathway. So all these plants, through their growth of the season, have injected so much volume of liquid carbon through photosynthesis, but then also the different forms to not only build total soil carbon, but where it can be taken out of the atmosphere and stored into the soil safely. But that's also the feed, the food, or the payment form for all of the microbial services in the soil. So there's so many different benefits to what we're doing.
So the question is, why is the whole of New Zealand still doing traditional winter grazing, and what are the obstacles for farmers getting through? In my mind, this is pretty clearly the future, but how do we communicate that to the rest of New Zealand and prove it and convince everyone else that this is the way to go?
Well, it's when you look at the system and you follow the money, like I'm going to be really straight here, is what we've got is the perfect business model for inputs of we've got everyone telling us that we need to plant monocultures, and as a result of planting monocultures, especially the ones that are treated with things like neonicotinoid seed treatments and other toxic coatings, as we then are starting, and when we put things like DAP down the spout with the seed, we're already starting our whole system with a requirement for us to do the work rather than the microbes in the soil. And so when we look at all the advice being given by industry, most advisors is that here we'll provide the seed and it's the perfect scenario for, and hey, by the way, you'll also need this product, this chemical, to keep it clean. It's going to need an insecticide spray, so we'll supply you that. It's also going to need fertilizer, because monocultures don't have the ability to feed diverse microbial communities to do that work for you.
I think, to clarify for everyone, this is the highest dry matter we've had ever on the farm, and we've had zero inputs, no insecticides, no herbicides, no pesticides, no fertilizer, just a little bit of water.
Yeah.
I think, to speak to your question, Finn, on what's maybe something stopping people from going this way, as it is very much, it's an unknown, and I think what's happening here is proof in the pudding that this can be a successful way of farming. But it's a complete shift in mindset around farming, because the management of this is actually the key. The crop itself, although the biodiversity and everything we've spoken about is hugely important, it's actually the management that's regenerative, right? And that management going forward is totally different. So it's a complete change in mindset for people, something which I've been through myself in my own farming practices, and that's a challenge. But
I think it's the unknown. Even when our first year we sampled it, and it's given us, this year's given us the confidence to actually, we do about 60 hectares of winter crop a year.
Yeah.
Half it this year was regen, or a little more than half actually, about 40 hectares this year was regen. But next year with confidence, we've got learnings, happy with soil health, happier with animal weight gains, both on the sheep and the cattle. So we'll take it through further pastures.
And I think for you guys there was an element of trust, and it was great. I'll never forget Jussie when the first day I come here. You guys were really stepping out into the unknown and asked me to come along and educate the guys and get the team all enrolled in the outcomes that you wanted to create. But it was just such a big unknown. I'll never forget Jussie saying, "Hey, look, are you going to be there, to guide us in a way that's going to allow us to get the results?" And a lot of people, just simply don't have the courage or the willingness to step out. And there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, there is a bit of absurdity in what we're doing as well. You know, it's not the common, and when you look at the science and all of the literature that we've got, you know, all you need to do is pick up a Lincoln Technical Farm Manual, and it'll tell you that, you know, it's almost like you can't farm without fertilizer. You can't grow things together. None of the science that is mainstream allows for the complexity of the conversations that we're having right now. And so there's, what I love about you guys was there was like a willingness, and also you knew what you wanted to achieve. You didn't quite know how to achieve it, but the commitment was there, and through that commitment, and also wanting it to work, because that's the other thing, is like we see something new, if we don't agree with it, because most of the time what comes up when we get offered something new is like we then grapple with, is this something I agree with or not? And if it's not, then most of what we listen to goes in one ear and out the other. And Jake and I spoke about this on the way here this morning, is like the importance of you know, the mindset around what you're doing, because if you don't want to step out into a new paradigm where nutrient provision can be made naturally, and we can, you know, increase animal health and soil health and all of this in one, you know, perfect storm, is you know, a lot of people will subconsciously sabotage the operation to be right about it not working. And when, you know, a lot of the industry is saying that you can't do this, it's so easy to slip into, oh man, maybe this is crazy, oh man, maybe this isn't going to work. But when we have this in the background and we have these outcomes, you know, finally you guys get to see it for yourself. It must give, like you said, give you that confidence. And it's such a, you know, Jake, you mentioned about the mindset shift, and for me, you know, as an agronomist, my background as an agronomist, as being someone who is responsible for, you know, advising farmers on what nutrients they need to apply, what chemicals to apply, the different rates, the different combinations, is, sure, when I first heard about the stuff, I thought it was crazy, and I wanted to sabotage it, to be right about it being crazy, and it worked. You know, I was not expecting it. When I first did my first crop with Tim Chamberlain, and he said to me about growing these plants underneath this crop of barley, I was like, mate, we better get you checked in, you know.
And so, how's that been for you guys in your first season? This shift, you know, your mindset shift. Or, yeah, what's that look like for you?
Well, as time goes on, your confidence grows. Yeah, there's little stress points, and you know, if your reference is only ever, you know, ryegrass and clover, you know how that performs, and you know what it should be doing. And when you come and look at a new regenerative paddock and it's doing something different, you have a little moment of panic. You know, uh-oh, have we gone the wrong way? And you do, Johnny. You find yourself having little moments. Should I change back? You know, there have been little moments we've had to bridge those gaps, but no, overall, as time goes by, you know, confidence builds, and every farmer wants healthy, you know, fat, happy stock. And so, you know, days like this, when you go and check out your stock, and you can see them, they're happy as, they're here hanging out with us. You know, their weight gains are fantastic. So that's ultimately what we're trying to do.
That's the first move I've heard. I was about to say.
I think they were just agreeing with you.
It's amazing though. Every time on a winter crop, you're right, Jono, they're all standing there mowing. That was the first move I've heard in the half an hour I've been here.
Yeah.
Getting bored, I think.
Yeah.
Sick of listening to us.
Yeah.
Well, on that note, guys, firstly I want to acknowledge you for the willingness and for the work that you guys are doing, because it is a high level of commitment, and that takes guts, and I really want to acknowledge you guys for that. And also the difference you're making out there in the world of agriculture. Like, first, you know, the first carbon positive farm in the country, and you know, that was all certified and quantified. Next year we get to then come out with the information like how much carbon this crop has pumped into the soil, and you know, my experience says it's really common to see upwards of 1.2% organic matter increase, and that's just in the top 150 mils. We start digging down to 600-800 millimeters, we're pumping carbon down deep. And I mean, if we were to put an economic value on that, like what Australia is, you know, the world of the science around what we're doing here is catching up, and like the innovators at Lake Hawea Station are, I invite the rest of you to get curious, get interested in this conversation, because it is, I believe it's the future, and it's what Jake and I are committed to with Natural Performance. And you know, certainly get in contact with us if you'd like to learn more for yourself. But the other thing is, you know, get in contact with guys that are doing it, because you know, I've travelled a lot around the country in the last few months, and everywhere I go, I can see more of these crops, and it fills me with joy. But also, what that tells me is wherever you are, there's bound to be someone nearby that you can go and visit, touch it, see it, feel it, dig a hole, get connected to the soil, because you know it is the most important resource we have on the planet, and it's about time we start treating it with the respect that comes with. So, yeah, thanks.
Cool. Thank you.
Thank you guys. Thank you.
Right.
Cool.
Well done, Paige. How are your arm, Paige? Getting
Pretty sure. This one might be a bit shaky, but I can save this and send it to you.